Hey, fellow G&Ters, those of us who like our spirituality with a twist. So we are back with the final part of what became a series of episodes. There's a member of our G&T community family who had loss, a death in the family, and we decided to do this series of episodes kind of in recognition of that. The previous ones we had done had been a little bit more on the personal side. We were talking some of our reactions to that experience and things related. But this one is going to be a little bit more conversation kind of on specifically the Tibetan Book of the Dead and the Bardo. And we had talked about these things before, but if you talk about them once a year or something, there's not a bad thing in that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So we wanted to kind of like go through it again and really talk about this whole death thing. What is it anyways? Not a small question. It has some import in all of our lives. And I was like, when I was thinking about like the details of this for the week, I thought about our conversation last week, Daniel, and you had brought up this whole issue of the denial of the reality of this within our culture or something. People don't want to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's sort of a major thing you brought up last week. And it kind of shifted in a weird way. I also was thinking a lot when you brought the subject matter up, we were sort of like freestyling it. And I thought a lot about pain, you know, and how people are afraid of pain too, very reasonably. So, you know, this whole set of issues of like those two things, but the denial part is a big deal. Uh, and we sort of talked about that a little bit, but we didn't get a chance to talk about these kind of meditations that they do in the Tibetan Buddhist and Tantric tradition, specifically about making people get over that denial, which, as you said, is an important thing, right? You can't sit around denying it, right? So the funny thing about it is when you talk about, you know, these kinds of contemplations that they ask you to do, again, we're drawing a lot on the Dalai Lama school because, you know, that's the one that I happen to, you happen to draw on the most with these conversations, but I think they all ask you to do this. I don't think there's much difference between any of these schools. They all do it. The funny thing about that struck me is that it's really not, they're not optimistic contemplations. But on the other hand, I don't think you're supposed to think of them as pessimistic either. I think you're supposed to think of them as realistic. And then I think there's supposed to be an undercurrent of optimism hidden in it for the reason that like life continues on beyond this life for everyone. So that, I think that's the weird part. Usually beginning before that, you're supposed to think about the preciousness of the life you have. And then ultimately you're really supposed to think this, my lives will continue in some way and I'll be doing other stuff besides this life. So it's a reframing of the whole question, but I don't think you're supposed to feel pessimistic about it exactly. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, no, I think, well, yeah, no, I mean, that's definitely what they're trying to do. Like they don't want you feeling pessimistic. So it's kind of like the, I guess you could say the affliction is the medicine.
Yeah. I mean, that's the kind of attitude that you have in these things for sure.
Yeah. You know, and to accept it is the only way. I mean, really, that is the only, you know, we'd like to have things not be so black and white, like, you know, but at some point that it does boil down, and acceptance is your only option. You can resist, but you won't resist and through and through.
Well, resistance is futile, as they say in the films.
That's right. Yeah. So I think it's important, you know, that we have these conversations, and, you know, we do a little series on things. Some other podcasts will do, you know, one-offs of different episodes every week, but we kind of run little series because I think we'd like to have a little bit more longer form kind of discussion, you know, just for ourselves to kind of have some time to think about things as we kind of go through
give
it.
People time to think about things between the episodes too.
Yeah. And you know, so as we kind of like work towards the crescendo here, I think the big piece about all this is that, like, you know, resistance is futile, acceptance is necessary. That's for me, this is the kind of like the key. And then once you get to that stage, okay, then what? And you could say in your mind, oh yeah, okay, resistance is futile, acceptance is necessary. Got it. Okay, cool. Now what? Well, assuming that you feel that, actually, you didn't just repeat it, there are things that you can do to kind of help yourself along the process. And so I think how, you know, you had mentioned with your grandfather, or myself a little bit with my grandmother, being kind of a death doula, if you will. I know that's a job, but, like, you know, helping steward people along their process is one way. But then simultaneously, on like in a smaller reflection, you also have just everyday kind of loss that occurs, right? Or everyday transition. We won't even call it loss. We'll call it transition that occurs. One that comes to my mind is one of my patient's daughters is going off to college. They have a very close relationship, and she's been kind of hiding it from her daughter, and it's been eating at her. And so she's like, really, really physically active and doing all kinds of stuff just to busy her mind. But she's got injured and she came in for treatment. And at some point she said, I'm just busying myself not to deal with this, but I don't want my daughter to worry about me. And I just said, look, this is kind of like someone passing. If you have this conversation with her and you open it up and air it out, then the time that you have left, whether it be a month or a few weeks or whatever, you can spend together knowing that like you have lived this chapter of your time together to the fullest. And I think that's the point, right? So you have to accept that this is the way that it's going to be, but it's not a nihilistic viewpoint of saying, oh, that's the end, therefore that's it. It's actually the opposite. It's saying that's the end point. Let's live it up the best way that we can between now and then. And that's the kind of hope, at least that I have.
Yeah, I think it's all true. And then, there's a metaphysical component to this as well, which is just like there's an aspect of each living thing that's going to transcend this existence. There's a Buddha nature. There's a thing beyond, this. And so I think, well, like a couple of different things happening, when you talk about within like your life and losses and things like that, of course, those are painful. When you think about the big ending of all of our lives that's going to happen, there's like this magic in that you're supposed to discover too, which is that, you will continue on, in some form or another beyond this, there's, so anyways, it's like kind of like two sets of ideas running right parallel, right? There's the acceptance of change and the acceptance of loss and the acceptance of these things that you're talking about, I think, right? And taking the attitude with it, which is what, like, okay, I accept that these things are going to happen. And I also like take the attitude that like, I'm going to like make this shit good with what I have, right? Yeah. And then the other part is like, when you get to like the actual end of like anyone's life, there's this heart of magic in it, which is that, there's this magical thing called a Buddha nature, which will continue on, which is, I guess we'll talk to it when we do the Tibetan Book of the Dead stuff. But, I think that you're supposed to like look at it from that point of view too. Otherwise it is like, otherwise you're talking about something that's much more of a bummer.
Right.
You're supposed to see this other thing, which is fucking hard in this culture. We've done tons of episodes on this. It's really hard to get to that place because the culture doesn't really support it. Unless you're like, it's Christianity or some materialism, and you're kind of like, well, okay, so if you're not a Christian, you're a materialist. And like, so in part, we're talking to both of these audiences, anyone who might be interested.
Yeah. I mean,
but, that's the thing. There's something else beyond. So
I mean, this culture, we value youth, we value beauty. I mean, all cultures do really, youth and beauty, vitality, but then simultaneously we hide the aged, we hide the aging process, like, I mean, everybody wants to feel as good and as young as you possibly can. Of course, that's been that way forever. I mean, snake oil salesmen were there because they were selling something that somebody was buying. You know what I'm saying? Like,
in the non-snake oilsman sense, traditional Chinese medicine, our day jobs has been working on trying to keep people, as vital and healthy and young as possible for millennia. That's like a major goal of what they're trying to do in all these different ways. So, yeah.
So, by acknowledging these things, I think it's just accepting one of the facts of life.
Okay. So here's the, I mean, I just kind of did like a shorthand of the kind of things they ask you to contemplate. There's a real like kind of systematic way of doing this that Lama Tsongkhapa, the founder of the school of the Dalai Lama, has laid out. And it's drawn on other people too. Gampopa from the Kargu school does something like this. So there's this thing of doing this, I'm positive that they all have this. Mifam, all these old Tibetan named people will have things like this some way or another. So I didn't do the official whatever 9 rounds or something. I just wanted to bring up the kind of issues that they talk about that you're supposed to think about. So I guess part of the important point is it's supposed to be kind of a systematic contemplation. So anyway, so they do things like this with the context of you're really not supposed to be pessimistic. So all right, anyway, so you've realized the preciousness of your life and the beauty of life and the fact that you're going to continue on. And then you kind of go, well, okay, as far as this life goes, inevitably this life is going to end. There's just no way around that. And you have to like think of the inevitability of this. I was trying to prep for it for this week for us. So I made myself do this a little bit more. And I did it in the context of thinking about, kind of what we were just talking about. that I have a transcendent part of myself too, a Buddha nature or a spirit or a soul or whatever you want to call it, consciousness that's transcendent of like just my physical body. And it's a powerful thing to do, right? Um, and I think just thinking about the power of the mind is kind of powerful, and that the power of the Shen and the spirit is powerful. So there's that part. They talk about the fragility of the body. So they want you to think, okay, the body is kind of a fragile thing, has all these different parts. Some parts may eventually clog up and break. Daniel was just talking in the pre-show about this clunker car, a lemon of a car. Hopefully nobody has a lemon of a body. We got stuck with a lemon car, unfortunately. It happens. Hopefully none of our bodies are lemons. But the whole thing that like things can get kind of like fragile, and it's easy for things to break inside. It's easy for things to happen outside the body. So there's a sort of a meditation on that. Just be aware of, the vulnerability of the body, which not in a way that's supposed to make you paranoid, but in a way that's supposed to make you just think, oh yeah, there's I should be aware of this aspect in terms of the idea that, like, I'm not going to be around forever, and there's real reasons why that's the case.
Right.
But they do a whole thing about life is going to end, but it's only getting shorter. It's not getting longer. There's never any day where you the day before, like that ain't a thing. Every day it's just gonna get shorter. So I think the point where to light a fire under people's asses, like what you were talking, good, to put value in it. Again, that's not meant to be like a dreary thing that you're supposed to walk around all pessimistic about. It's really supposed to get you like, yeah, this doesn't go on forever. Let me get my ass in gear and do good shit in whatever ways are meaningful, And then when they talk about ways that are meaningful, they make this last series of points, which is something like wealth is not going to last. So whatever you had in terms of like material wealth is not going to go with you. There's like the old black and white movie, you can't take it with you. True. Can't take it with you. And then even the relationships with loved ones, though you build them up and they have karmic meaning and karmic intensity, and you can cross paths with those people in the future. And those relationships can be bonds that you have where you discover people that in some way, like you and I. We discovered like a connection between us, right? And now we do this thing. And like from a Buddhist point of view, Tibetan Buddhist point of view, Tantric point of view, whatever point of view you want to talk about, like this is not just happening because of the now. This is happening because we had built the ties of some relationship sometime before, and it's reappearing again, right?
And for those who are interested, we have some episodes. I think they're called Karma Explained, where we do a bit of this kind of breakdown on karma. They're good conversations if you haven't heard them before. And if you have heard them, go ahead and pop them up again. You might learn something. Or not.
I have talked to people who listen to these things more than once when there's something that's interesting for them.
Yeah, so. I have too.
Yeah, so I think like that adds a different tone to it too, because like the relationships you're building now, make them good. Don't make them shitty. Make them good, because those people are probably going to cross your path again at some time or another, and you don't want them all like edgy with you.
But I would be remiss to say, Eric, if we didn't have some episodes where we kind of crapped on like soulmates and some twin flame things, and that...
Oh, you crapped on that much more than I did, my friend. I approached that with the humility of respect.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Kicked in the nuts by that repeatedly. I am very respectful of that. Yeah, okay, those are different episodes too, people can listen to, but like I've had like some intense experiences with people, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to respect this shit.
Right.
Yeah, I don't play games with the soulmate thing. I'm like, okay, this is intense, things can happen between people, all right. And so you treat those people with respect. Yeah. Anyways, but the thing I think that's optimistic about this, and I've talked about it with my son and my daughter, and the idea that the bonds that you're building are gonna like probably reappear in some way, the important ones, and they're gonna show value to you in the future. Which is a different attitude too. I don't think we do that. And I think in our culture, it's like people are disposable, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't know.
People are disposable.
That one I'm not so sure. I know people have their friends and their cohorts and their, do you know what I'm saying? Even your children, you know?
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? Like there's just some, yeah, I mean, I think in some corporate level, of course, that's, you know, on some level, everybody looks at that, but I don't think that, I don't know that the culture, I don't know that I could say that the culture teaches that.
Okay, separate episode. Something for you and I to chat about for sure. And we'll like, you know,
I mean, I
been
could
meaning
say
to do
that our,
something, meaning to do something called neoliberalism and you. So maybe we'll
yeah,
put
for
it
sure.
under
I
the
mean, I could say
neoliberalism and you episode.
the culture promotes self-aggrandization. It promotes self-promoting, promotes self-marketing. You know what I'm saying? Definitely self-minded things, but I don't know that it, and that's active about that. You know, you can be anything you want. You should be a millionaire. You know, all these kind of things, right? But I don't know that I could remember anybody say, people like repetitive viewpoints saying, get rid of people. They're use them. You know.
Okay, huge episode.
Okay, I'm just saying.
The only thing I would say about it would be my discovery of you, Daniel, is you're a very loyal person.
Right.
Yeah. I think you're an outlier. But we could
Possibly.
talk about that, you know?
Possibly,
Yeah.
but you know, I have a, you know, and some of whom, so this is kind of real, right? Now we get real. So I have a number of friends,
Uh-huh.
several of whom frequent this podcast on a regular
Uh-huh.
basis. They're loyal. Their loyalty is probably equivalent to mine because we've been friends for so long through so many various things. So I would agree, but I will also say to the point that you brought up previously, it's like if we have bonds with certain people in this lifetime, then those are probably going to be the ones that have value. You know what I'm saying? And I don't know how we would have time to have such a huge network of people that we could always call upon. There's just not that much time available in life. So I understand what you're saying. But I don't know that it's a culture. I don't know that the culture does that. I think that just might be people's nature, you know, and the fact that like we live in such kind of a windy society where things are turning. Yes, we live in the windy city, Chicago, for our international listeners. But you know, windy meaning like there's high amounts of turnover. People are moving, jobs are changing, families are changing. You know, it's kind of in and out.
Well, okay, we're due to have some episodes on
Yeah.
relationships in general.
Yes. Yes. That's a there's good foreshadowing right there.
And I think you and I are going to have some conversation about that.
Yeah, that's good. I'm ready.
But I also understand you don't want to like be on a podcast and say, "Oh yeah, yeah, everyone's disposable" when you have your friends listening to this.
But I'm not
Hello,
pandering.
friends who are disposable.
I'm not pandering. I'm not pandering by
No,
any.
I don't. I'm just joking. But
Okay. Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
no, you're not. You're a very loyal person.
Yeah.
Hmm. Okay. Well, okay. If we start talking about that, we'll be here for the whole
We will be here.
episode,
We'll
and
be
we'll
right
never
here.
try to talk about death.
Back to Bardo.
Never talk about death. Anyway, so they say, wealth, loved ones, and then finally, even this body that you've been so attached to this whole life, literally and psychologically, is going to go. So that's kind of the thing. So then they say, well, what's going to hang around? Well, in a way, different things are going to hang around. Like the skills that you build are going to hang around in a sense. You know, if you like spend a lot of time doing music, you probably carry some musical skill with you. You spend a lot of time. My son, for some reason, has this whole thing about chess. There's his little blankie hanging in the background. And so he just has some chess karma. He's had it since he was young. Something happened. He built something around that, and so on. Medicine, the arts of different types, whatever it might be for you, business acumen, different things, you'll probably carry those things with you. So there's a certain like, look at what you develop in the course of your life too, because you're going to carry in some ways those tendencies with you, those relationships, those things. But in the immediate, they're not going to be there, and you're going to continue on your journey.
You could say that like education, experience, skills, hobbies are ways that we can update our software.
That will have to get a little bit of a reboot, but aspects will carry on. Mm-hmm. I think that's fair to say. But then they get to the big one, which is going to be spiritual practice. So when they say, well, what's really going to do you the most good of all of these things is going to be your meditative, philosophical, and spiritual contemplations.
So spiritual practice, what would that consist of?
I think we're talking about like everything we've been talking about the whole time, like how you meditate, how you study spiritual ideas, how you contemplate these things, how you contemplate your life in these deeper ways. Yeah, all of that stuff, as they're saying, that's the most valuable aspect of all these things that you'll take with you, I think.
But you could also include the way in which you carry yourself, how you interact with the world. Your,
Oh
you know,
yeah, I got by all of that, but then
yeah.
they have this little pocket of things that, like if you meditate on Buddha nature and you actually kind of become like, oh, I think there is something like that, and you have like moments of feeling that, that's going to be a kind of a powerful experience for you for something like this,
Okay.
and something powerful to carry on. Though I agree, I think I was kind of like, even more so than the way we talk about it, I think we're both emphasizing the idea of like, yeah, what you do in this life, the
Yeah.
relationships you build, the habits that you build, right?
Mhm.
The knowledges that you acquire, all that stuff is really important. And then you have this last little kind of kernel of things, which is, like how you build the spiritual aspect of who you are. Let's put it like that, maybe, which could be built up of things like meditation and, you know, contemplation and questioning and exploring, different ways of thinking about spiritual aspects of life.
Mhm.
Those things are going to carry on in a powerful way. So it's a sell job on that.
Mm.
If you want to be honest about it. But it's a decent sell job. It's a good sell job on something that's good. It's trying to say, hey, you should spend some time doing this
Mhm.
in the context of your life, because that's going to carry a lot of value, even when other things are going to be, they're going to follow, but this will really create a core of something for you. Does that make sense to you, or what do you
Yeah,
think?
I
Yeah.
got
I don't know. When you talk about like what spiritual practice involves, I think you're right. You want to include like how you act, not just if you're sitting and meditating, it's how you
it.
act in your life outside of that too.
Yeah, I was
But
working with
yeah,
a client of mine this morning, and we were talking about something, and he goes, "Well, one thing I don't have is anger issues." He's like, "I hope that as I age and if my mind declines, I'll maintain my sense of humor."
yeah,
And I
yeah.
just thought that was just such an insightful thing to say in the middle of like doing push-ups. But like it really is like I've never seen him, and I've known him now for well over a year, never seen him angry, ever.
Mhm.
A little frustrated over some life things, but like not to the point of anger. Never,
Mhm.
like never turns everything into humor, some way to kind of laugh about it. And I just in that moment, I was like, man, that says a lot to his internal state. Now he doesn't meditate or anything; he's not like that, but I don't know. I find sometimes you get windows into people's cognitive processes or their hearts or whatever, whatever you want to think of, heart mind connection. And it gives you a lot about them. And that moment sort of hit me. And I was like, oh, okay. There you are on the inside, existing in a pleasant place. It's nice.
I think I think of the Chinese medicine about this, because it's this ability to take the other emotional states and turn them into humor, laughter, joy, whatever. So in Chinese medicine, they talk about the heart being associated with this fire phase. We're going to do a bunch of stuff on elements in a little bit, just to talk about the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And I always think about this, and I think I probably got it from my teacher from China too, Master Wong, who was like, you have to find like this joyful place inside yourself over and over and over again, like all the time.
Mm.
I got some episodes on his meditation style that I did a while ago back in 2020, and I never put them up. I probably will under our little shots of spirits that are like overdue to be replenished. I've got a couple of episodes that I did that have to be like put up at this point. But in any case, yeah, that was his sort of meditation style, to find that. And what you realize from a Chinese medical point of view is you're finding yourself back to the natural emotion of the heart,
Mm.
which is joy. So if you can take anger and transmute it into joy, if you can take sadness and grief and somehow transmute it into joy, like an
Nice work.
Irish wake,
Uh,
you're at the wake, you tell some jokes, you drink a little bit, you know, there's a whole song called Finnegan's Wake. If you haven't heard it, you can listen to the Irish song about the wake. Everyone gets rowdy, drunk, and a brawl starts.
mhm.
An Irish wake. Maybe you turn sadness and grief into anger. I don't know. That's not the way. But you're supposed to be a joy,
Mhm.
in all these things. So, anyways, that whole idea that you can like transmute these emotions into this more joyful place, then you're an inner alchemist, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. Um, yeah, cool. Okay, but they're still going to do the sell job on the spiritual thing. There's no way around that. All the good stuff we do in our life, one side, and then the other part is like you contemplate your spiritual stuff. All right. which gets us to the Book of the Bardo that we wanted to walk through the death, what is it anyways part from a Book of the Bardo point of view. So there's no doubt, and this has been the theme running through the whole episode, that there's the separation of the spirit or the soul or the consciousness or the mind or whatever word you want to use from matter. That's just kind of like across this whole set of conversations. Like even in our Chinese medical world, we talk about yin and yang separating, and the yin is the body and the yang is the shen, the spirit of the person, and they separate, and that's called death. But there's a thing that's separating away. So we've done our episodes on materialism. I just got a text from somebody in the past week where he was listening to those episodes, and he was like, wow, this is a real thing y'all are hitting on. It's a genuine problem. I want to have him on as a guest. I won't give away who he is. But anyways, he reached out and he was like, because I'm not sure who's going to come on yet and when, but it's something that we know. And we were like, yeah, that's a good thing. And he was talking about it, like how he feels like it affects all of music and art in interesting ways. So anyways, he has opinions about this. So I thought, okay, good, come on. So a preview of a vague preview of something that we may do in the future. But anyways, this whole idea,
probably too often.
But a lot of them we eventually get to. They're in our hearts to do, and eventually we get to them. So and we got to work. So what can you do?
Doing our best here.
Yeah. So okay, so there's definitely this idea of a consciousness or a spirit or whatever outside of the physicality, outside of the brain, which is a whole other set of episodes we've done, and we'll probably do more in the future. But
Eric,
explore that thing more. But
go,
that's it.
Just a thing, for just our small 100,000 audience, roughly, it's about what it is. If you guys are interested, and we say this regularly, but like if you're interested in some particular topic that you'd like us to go over, or you're interested in, or whatever, please send us a message. Like I'm not guaranteeing that we're going to do it, but like we'll bring it up, I'll look into it, and if it's worth talking about, if it's worth spending an hour, 2 hours on it, then or even a half hour, we'll bring it up and we'll kick it around. And so because sometimes it's nice to have, Eric has stuff he wants to do, I have stuff I want to do, but it's nice to have some different perspectives, different opinions, and we are open to those things. So before we pop in, I wanted to just make sure that I say that.
Yeah, I think we've done stuff like that before. People have brought up an issue and we're like, oh yeah, we should do that.
Yeah.
So anyways, it's a big subject, but just to point it out there, that's part of the reason why this is a more optimistic framework, because there's a part of each of us that is going to continue on, a core of pure consciousness or something like that. Clear light mind is like kind of, if you listen to Dalai Lama, he'll talk that way. So people can say Buddha nature, you can say the person Shen, whatever word you like, that's all good. But anyways, there's this whole idea, and then there's all the kind of, I guess you'd say, information carried along with that particular person, because we've all had lives where we've done all these things. So that's where you build up, like, oh, I can play chess. Oh, I love this person. Oh, I do this. I know how to have a relationship. I know how to do these things. There's stuff that stream of that consciousness has developed too, but that's going to flow forward.
So Eric, the idea. They talk about, like, they give reference to this, for those who aren't familiar, they talk about the mind as like a clear light experience. I'm not exactly sure what, it's composed of clear light, or it is clear light. Like, my sort of question or thought is that, like, from, your experience, is the mind itself clear light, or is the radiance of the mind, or that part of the being that continues, clear light? So is it both, from your experience? Because I've always, it's a subtle question, right? Like, is it the light from the bulb, or the bulb itself, or the bulb emitting the light together creates that light, And I don't know that I'm not sure that I could say I've had an experience that would definitively give me one side or the other, but maybe that's just separation and I can't experience them separately.
Yeah, it's kind of a funny question. Okay, so let me see if I can kind of get to the unpacking of something like that. So there's a real question of, I guess, like, what is the subjective experience of the person? So I guess to me, in like say, if you listen to Dalai Lama talking about this, and he's representing this Lama Tsongkhapa kind of line of thought, founder of the school of the Dalai Lamas and all that. So the subjective experience is one of clear light. They don't always even say bliss and emptiness here, though sometimes they will. I get the feeling from like Gelek Rinpoche's point of view, who's one of the other people that we studied with, that like those are kind of cultivated things where this mind of clear light can realize bliss and emptiness. Okay, so in a way, I think you're talking about like how that feels subjectively to the person in those moments when that mind appears, when that state appears, right? And then there's a whole thing of like where they'll say something like recognize that that is the, however you want to phrase it, core of your being or something like that, core of your mind, that that's the core. So you have to recognize that experience as the core. So I don't know if that unites the two things you're talking about into one thing, but I think it kind of does. And there seems to be this idea of recognition.
Mm.
It definitely comes up in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, in the Bardo book, because there's this moment where this is going to appear. And there's a big point made of like, recognize this as this is the core of your being. And that experience will probably flit past.
Yeah.
And you'll miss it, you know? But like, you're supposed to recognize like there's all these, it's like they kind of use the metaphor of the water and the glass that settles, you know, and then you see the pure water or something, as opposed to all there's all the other stuff that's floating inside. Something like that comes up a lot, you know. So this moment of recognition, and there's supposed to be this aha, oh wait a minute, that's a thing, that's the core of my nature. Then there's another trippy part that will happen, especially happens in like this thing called the Guya Samaja. This is brought up one of the Buddhist tantras, where you can also kind of find that clear light in all of your experiences, because it's the core of the mind when that experience shows up. But there's also a way, I think Dzogchen, the great perfection schools, are like this too, where like hidden inside of every single experience you have, this thing is still there because it's the core of who you are. So I think there's moments of subjective experience of like bang, where this will appear. And they kind of talk about moments when this happens. It's supposed to happen in certain moments during sleep. It's supposed to happen in terms of like sexuality, you know. It's supposed to happen in terms of like, and you brought this up too, even like weird mundane things like when people sneeze, this pops up for a second. But in any case, there's these moments where it will appear, and then there's supposed to be this moment of recognition, where those two things I think that you were bringing up get united. But then there's also this line of thought that goes, wait a minute, if you really take a step back and think about it, it's there all the time, you know, in every experience, because it's the root of who you are, right? So in every sensory experience that you have, which is like all the experiences you have are in some ways either outside senses or experiencing your own emotions and your own thoughts or whatever, that thing is always kind of there. So I've wrestled with that set of questions too. I totally get that. For me, there's also been the thing of like, when they say when this really gets hit, there's going to be this moment of seeing that, like, I suppose it's kind of like everything becomes this clear light thing. This has fascinated the hell out of me forever. This is another one of these things where you never know what we're going to talk about once this mic goes on, because we weren't prepped to talk about this at all. But, you know, we're talking from the heart of what our experiences are. So I was reading this Kabbalistic book called the Bahir. And one of the passages that hit me in that thing, not only Kabbalistically, but even like from all my Zen and Taoist thoughts and all that, Buddhist thoughts of different types, tantric thoughts up to that point, kind of coalesced around this thing, which was that it says something like, from the point of view of the divine, and we'll just use divine, I think they say the endless. They don't even say God is the word in this one. I have to double check and look at the Bahir again, but I think I got it sitting on the shelf. I have to peek it. But anyways, that's the way I remember it. From the point of view of the divine or the endless or something like that, everything is just itself. Everything is just the light of the endless. And they use light there too. They use that same metaphor. The word light appears a lot, right? So everything is just that light. But from the point of view of relative beings, everything appears how it appears. Now, if you get shunyata, if you get emptiness, that's a way of talking about emptiness too. Because from everyone's individual perspective, they're seeing their own stuff. You know, as Ram Dass, a friend of mine was talking about Ram Dass recently. We're both going through our struggles. And she said, I was listening to Ram Dass. She loves him a lot. And she said, well, we're all on our own trip, was Ram Dass's comment. And I was like, okay, that's not that many words, but that's true. We're all on our own trip. Yeah, everybody's having their own trip. So yeah, we're all having our own trip. But from the
Mhm.
point of view of like the biggest point of view, everything is just this clear light phenomenon. And I don't know, this hit me like a fucking thunderbolt for whatever reason in that moment. It was a thought I'd had before, but I just coming from that source or something at that time, it really hit me.
Mm.
And I started thinking, you know what? I remember talking with students about it back in the day. I remember thinking like having the thoughts and talking with some students about it. I had this group of students I was specifically training in Chinese pulse diagnosis. And so we were talking, I was like, this is so weird for me because I think that's true. And
Mm.
yet I can't see things that way all the time. So I had that weird moment of like, that sounds really true to me. But at the same time, I had to admit to myself, like, I'm not seeing that subjectively. I have moments where I see and experience things that way. And I decided, well, the bad is not, that's my fault. That's not the fault of the light of the endless. It's not its fault. That's me. That's on me to do that. And that actually in a funny way led me to like go back through the Buddhist Tantra route because I felt like, yeah, I need to like get to this thing of like seeing things that way. And we all have our own spiritual stories of why we do what we do at different times. Okay. But like there are other reasons why I was like thinking about the different emphasis I placed in different parts of my spiritual life at different times.
Mhm.
But in any case, it also got me thinking a lot about this Buddha nature thing and where you like experience the clear light Buddha nature inside of yourself. And then you also realize everything is that actually. And then sometimes I describe that as like this experience of like water pouring into water. So you have the subjective experience and then you realize everything is that. And then water pours into water,
Mm.
which I'd like to get more clear in this life
I,
before I'm done. But I've gotten better at it over the years. Like I get like, that thing, like you're like, yeah, that's probably is how it is.
I
Mhm.
really like this term, the endless. I'll be honest. I think that that does a way better job of describing the thing than, the divine or something like that. Divine almost has an
Mhm.
air of like, at least at this point for me, like impure angel-esque, what I'm
Yeah,
saying,
yeah.
omnipotent type power. What I'm saying? Like
Mhm,
divine
mhm.
has power. But when you say something is endless, that just you can't even it does a much better job of not allowing, at least not allowing my mind to coalesce around any kind of concept. They call that
Yeah.
reification. Like I can't
Mhm.
reify anything because it's like, well, there's no ending, which means when did it start? I don't know, never. Like how does that exist? It's almost like it exists outside of conceptuality, which to me is more divine than divinity.
Well, what's interesting about that is like that's like your inner whatever it is, Kabbalist or whatever,
For sure.
Sufi, because the whole point of it is to like go through and not give you anything to hang on.
Mm-hmm.
I can remember reading like the Zohar and doing the meditations around the Zohar and things like that, such as I did them. And like, that's a big thing. And there's a big conversation. The Zohar is one of the other Kabbalist books that's really famous.
Mm-hmm.
Book of Splendor. From like, okay. So, anyways, this thing, there's just a whole question of like the nature of like the connection of the endless to things that are more finite. It's like a major point of discussion. And we haven't done like a Kabbalistic series, but it seems like we're
No.
hyped to do it because there's inner resonance for both of us. So we'll be hyped to do it at some point. And that we will do. We make these promises and it will happen at some point or another because we have a long checklist of shit to do.
I'd like to get. I would love it if our friend Mr. Miller would join us for that one. We'll see.
Well, I'm sure he will. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We could do a conversation with him just about his experiences with that and talk about him in his life. I like wouldn't mind doing a little
Yeah.
Jin and Tantra work up on that, and then we can do our own series too. hmm Yeah, I like the idea. Yeah, we have a friend who's definitely has experience with this
Mm-hmm.
and is a Chinese medical person and just a profound person just in general.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so but anyway, so yeah, so this is the thing. So that's the way I kind of think about the question that you're talking about. um, and I think you also want to like do with that one, Daniel. Or should we talk
Again.
about anything else you want to do with that, or should we talk about the
No, no.
Bardo
Yeah. Let's do
dissolving thing?
the
Okay,
photo. Yeah.
all right. So okay, so on this whole Bardo,
Well, actually, before you go, Eric, I think why I mentioned the endless is that like there is going to be much that is not conceptually understood. There is also much that is going to be conceptually understood. And so there's this kind of has to be this balance, but I think between the two, and that like you can in the spiritual practice is that not only are you, you're honing your contemplations and you're working with these difficult, kind of ideas, you're wrestling with them, you're feeling them or whatever, but then you're also not going to maybe have a specific answer and say, well, that is that, right? It's not going to be just boiled down to a nice, tiny little explanation. And then you're going to be put on a little bow and it's going to hang up in your closet with all the rest of your concepts that you learned in, reading, writing, and arithmetic. I don't believe. I think it's a constant thing that like we're working to refine, working to understand, working to embody, working to feel. And part of the process of looking at this is to take on the things that are, essentially larger than life, larger than just our finite experience. And that's very difficult because most of the things that we learn are kind of finite, actually. I mean, they may be like, there's levels of mastery, music, education, all of the different careers that are out there, but they're still within a whole, they're kind of like infinite amounts of wells that sort of all lead back to the source of the earth, for water, you use the water analogy. So I just think I wanted just to give people some like, I don't know, out in that, like, if you don't get it, no problem. Like that's okay, but like the fact that you're wrestling with it means that you're at least moving forward some momentum on your spiritual practice, on your own development, to be able to look at these difficult concepts and from various traditions and say, okay, I'm going to give it a try, or at least I'm going to think about it, as opposed to just like denying it or never even hearing about it.
Yeah, so for me, like, it was kind of funny because we went and we plopped in this very technical conversation in the middle of this episode. Plop. It just came up. But I think we talked about it in the way that's like honest to our experience and honest to our our hearts and whatnot. I think maybe it's a separate episode too. We're discovering tons of separate episodes within this episode.
And
But like,
multiverse.
I think you have like a very interesting set of questions personally about like what is like conceptual knowledge versus what is experiential knowledge. Like that's a big deal for you, right? And what conceptual means versus things that are transcendent of the conceptual. Like this really matters to you a lot in my conversations with you over the years and in this podcast. Like this is the thing that really matters. And there are like, like then you enter into this world where there are definitely like schools of thought that will say the emphasis of things to be non-conceptual, right? And then there's also like a thing that says, do you have to like, is it valuable to conceptualize things, and in what ways, even in your experiences, do you have to like learn how to conceptualize them? Otherwise those experiences will just flit along as experiences. So anyways, maybe that's a whole set of like a whole thing to have that conversation, what the heck that means. And I can kind of like see how it might work. But anyways, yeah, I know this is a huge thing that I think is kind of if you were doing Zen, you'd say this is a Zen riddle for you. This is a koan, a personal koan. Hosokawa Roshi, like the person I studied Zen with in the beginning parts of my life, great Zen master, like really great Zen master, honestly. He said that the koans that happen naturally are the ones that will probably be the ones that will carry you forward. Someone can ask you a riddle. What's the hand of one hand? What's the sound of one hand clapping? You're like, well, okay. you could try to answer it. But and it does have it like kind of things you can think about as an answer. We talked about with Guy Newland, actually, these koans seem more clear once you sort of get them, at least in part. But the whole thing of like the ones that come from inside, those are the ones that will really carry you forward, because those are the ones that really mean something to you personal. That's always stuck with me for like all of these years. I thought, yeah, that's really true. The personal koan is the one that will drive you forward. Oh, okay, cool. Well, one never knows. Mike goes on, who knows? But okay, anyway, so we wanted to do the Bardo thing. So all right, good points all the way around. Tip of the cap to both of us. We're both doing what we the best we can with this. All right, so there's going to be the separation of the Shen from, or the spirit from, the body, and kind of from the whole world surrounding the body too. I mean, that's kind of interesting. I never really thought about it in exactly those words, but that's true. Separation from the whole world surrounding the body in a way. So in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which as Robert Thurman who I want to have him on the show again.
Yeah, we should. I mean, I think we could bring him on. Like, we could talk about this actually.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I was almost thinking I'd love to have him on just to talk about relationships and sex and stuff too.
He'll do it.
He'll do it. And I thought, well, that's a different part of, maybe give him a chance to talk about something different. I'm going to try to reach out to him again and see. Okay. In any case,
I'd rather have him talk about this, but
our koans. All right. In any case, well, I thought it'd be interesting because he's a person who lived a lay person's life,
Sure.
So,
Anyway.
Okay. So, but in any case, so the idea is that he's really, because it means between.
Hold on, Eric, you cut out. Say that again for people.
The whole idea of talking about it not as the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Lama Glad made this point in his episodes, or maybe not with us, but he's made it certainly for sure.
Yeah.
That was sort of like that was a publisher's device to take advantage of the idea that the Egyptian Book of the Dead was popular. They weighed people's hearts on the scale, and well, that Anubis and Ra, and I don't know who all the other characters in that. But in any case, that was a kind of a popular thing. So they called it the Tibetan Book of the Dead when it got published, but that isn't the title. It's the Book of the Bardo, the Book of the Between. And this, of course, is a big thing for Robert Thurman, our beloved Bobby T, who talks about, this issue. It's a between thing, it's what happens between lives. And it's also what happens between all the little betweens of your day, like the idea that sleep is kind of a little bit of an analogous thing to death, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Shakespeare talks about that, each day, there's a little bit of sleep is like, like that little bit of death for the day. So it's a kind of about all these different transitions that happen in these very natural ways, live in, being a human being, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, but the thing is, in the Bardo, there's supposed to be this dissolution process that's supposed to happen. In the book, they describe this in stages. And people in their death will go through this whole process. But sometimes if you have people who are ill leading up to their death, they'll go through like stages of this process too. So they might have some of these experiences, they still have more time left in their life, but they'll have little snippets and snapshots of these things too that we can kind of talk about as we go through. So anyways,
I'm doing it now as you're talking.
Oh, you're doing it as yeah.
I want to say I'm like I'm over there, man.
So I was kind of looking at you like, okay, Daniel's doing something kind of deep inside.
Yeah. I totally was
through the Zoom. Sometimes we're doing that. So okay, so there's a special. So what we're talking about is there's a special set of visualizations around this, where you sort of imagine this process happening, and it's a kind of a tricky set of meditations. I don't think it's an easy set of meditations. I think it's something you have to spend time with.
Yeah.
But we'll definitely do something about this, either as a short little instructional video, or we'll do it together. Maybe one or the other of us will do it, or maybe we'll do one together. But it's kind of a tricky thing with lots of visualizations with it, where you try to imagine what it's like to subjectively experience this process of things kind of dissolving and eventually hitting upon like this core kind of clear light mind thing. And I know the Dalai Lama, at one point I was listening to him, and I think he does it. There's an idea that you do this 6 times a day. So he just said like, yeah, I do this 6 times a day. This dissolution thing, as part of like his daily meditation thing. So it's a real like important one in the Dalai Lama school for sure, right? But I think a lot of like the Himalayan schools do something kind of analogous to this.
And for people who maybe don't have a regular kind of practice of some type, which is fine, and this I'm at the level of like, if you meditate and that you're just counting you're not just, but you're counting your breath, well then good, that you're doing Zen. That's fantastic. People have reached enlightenment by just counting, not just, but counting their breath, like whatever it is. But when you have some of these, like, I'm not going to call them deeper, I'll call them like visualizing type processes that are native to you, it comes up in your life all the time, actually. They'll just sort of, or pieces of them will just pop up. You'll see, there's one point in this meditation where it's red. Well, anytime you see the sun setting, boom, you're reminded of that. Or anytime you see a movie where there's like a bright orange fire glow, you're like, oh, that reminds me of that. And so then like life begins to kind of like fold back onto you, reminding you of these particular states, and actually like life begins to look more like theater, like how Lama Glenn will say, and that like it's sort of reminding you, the hand that's writing things will kind of poke its finger on the page and break the fourth wall, like Deadpool, in Marvel. Hello.
Yeah, yeah. Turn to the camera and just say, "Hey, look at
Yeah.
it's a movie."
Check this out. I look good, right?
Yeah. Can you believe that shit that just happened in that last scene? Yeah, so yeah, there's that experience. There's like, I can't think, I want to say it's Rothko or something, but he makes these huge canvases, the painter, and some of them are like these red things. And I've been in a museum seeing it, it's like really tall and you just stare into the red and you feel it. Yeah. Okay, so it's the thing you can do if this speaks to you, right? Robert Thurman has a whole thing on this meditation. We'll do our things too. So it's a thing that gets talked about a lot. People give instruction on this. But anyway, so the way it's supposed to work in the process of a person passing away, or if you want to do meditative aspects of this, that they're going to go through these elements. And elements are always funny when you use these words. Because we don't talk that way anymore, but obviously in traditional culture you were always talking about in terms of elements and phases and things like that. It was very normal to talk this way, and they're kind of like poetical metaphors. When you say earth, you don't mean like the actual dirt and the whatever. I think I think I would have had that confusion before I was around these cultural ideas. They're poetical.
Yeah, I think
Mhm.
I also like, when I'm studying with, likes to use the term archetypes. And I like this also because it has a cognitive approach to the term, like the earth archetype makes you think it's more than just, again, just dirt, like there's some maybe aspect of earth element living within you, whatever that means.
Mhm. So this whole way of talking, I know however you want to call it, poetically or archetypally in this way. Yeah. So in the process of a person passing away, though, what's supposed to be happening is this earth starts to dissolve. And with this, like, there's the whole idea that there's a loss of an awareness of physical forms in the world, which means these are usually tied into a sense capacity too. And then this one, it's the sense capacity of sight starts to go. So the person will sort of stop seeing things around them. And so one of these elements will sort of like phase away. And then this one, it's a loss of earth. And what that really means is a loss kind of form. Now, one of our favorite subjects, I know one that I think you love a lot, Daniel, is the aggregates to the elements and the aggregates. So in Buddhism, they use this idea of this thing called the aggregates. And now you're talking about like the form aggregate of the person. Their awareness and interaction with form starts to go. Their body's still sitting there, right? But the connection of their mind, spirits, whatever to that is going away. Yeah. And so their connection to form is disappearing. And with this, there's this change of sight. And there's also just a change of awareness of like form in the world around them. Okay, so that's the first one that goes. Then the second one they talk about going is the water. So the water will dissolve. The poetry of it kind of seems intuitive. They talk about the water as sort of related to sort of the emotions or the feeling aggregate. So now the feelings of the person, probably more connected to this particular life in which they're in, will start to go away. But the big thing is the idea that people will tend to feel things as being good, bad, or neutral. So one of the things when you're talking about feelings, certainly in Tibetan Buddhist thought, Tantric Buddhist thought, you get this idea of these specific sort of three groups of feelings. We come from a Chinese medical perspective, and a lot of times you get the idea that each element has a set of emotions associated with it, which is true here too. But now we're talking about sort of feeling overall, and the fact that people will tend to feel things as being like, I don't like that thing, I'm drawn to that thing, I'm indifferent to that thing, this thing doesn't seem to impact me that much.
It's like,
So,
it's like some sort of like innate magnetism or repulsion,
or neutrality.
right? Or neutrality. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is kind of funny when you think of that, because it's like electron, proton, neutron.
That's yeah.
Yeah.
Right out of my head.
Yeah. So that whole idea that that's how nature kind of works, that's how our kind of feelings work. It's a weird way. It's an interesting way to group feelings. It's a you could still do like anger and anger like emotions,
Sure.
fear and fear like, they still do that, but it's also grouped in these three, which is just kind of interesting way to
It
do it.
it kind of reminds me of like young children who are very clear. Like you're like, you want to try this artichoke? No, it's written no. Nothing. You're not going to say no, just no. But then, something else, you'd be like, hey, do you want to eat this, brick of totally bitter cacao? Yes, I want to eat that thing. And you're like, you're not going to like it. I want it. And something else you'll give them. They're like, I don't know. I don't even see it. Is it there? Like, is it,
Yeah, they're completely
butter.
indifferent to it.
No.
You put the carrot on the plate and they're like,
where is
okay,
it? Where, like,
I guess I'll eat that, but all right.
Yeah. But like, there is not a process of like, they're not running it around their minds going, well, let me see. Like, it's not like that. It's just sort of like root level response to a stimulus, I guess I could say.
So I think it's a kind of a fascinating way of organizing the emotional life to really think of it that way. So that goes beyond this discussion of the bardo, and even like, it gets more into the meditative aspect of it, where you start to realize, okay, I have this water poetical aspect of me, which has to do with my feelings, and my feelings can go good, bad, or neutral, and kind of become aware of this within my life. And then also, like, at this point, they're supposed to be kind of dissolving away, whatever those were for this life start to go.
Mm-hmm.
And then in terms of the sense organs, there's specifically this idea of the sounds being connected to this. Mm-hmm. So the ears are kind of tied into this element or phase, or whatever you want to call it.
For the water element?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. If you're we have a lot of like traditional Chinese medical people listening. This doesn't totally match up. We can probably do the TCM of it at some other time.
Yeah.
But in any case, it's a little different, but you just have to kind of roll with it. Some of it overlaps and it's interesting, but some of it doesn't. Yeah, this one does. Mm-hmm. So, this is this whole idea of this. And then the next thing that kind of goes for the person is the fire element, which in this way of thinking has a lot to do with like concepts, or sometimes they'll use discernments. This is sort of like conceptually how people organize their world. They organize it this way, which is pretty interesting. We've talked about before. Sometimes they'll use the idea of like the discrimination, aggregate, but you kind of talked like that doesn't always sound good in English.
No.
And I know you don't like that one that way for
No,
sure. You kind of voice that opinion.
I like conceptual, the conceptualizing.
Yeah.
Or Robert Thurman likes to use the word reification. I like
interesting. Mm-hmm.
I like that, because I think we're doing that all the time. Even in like right or wrong stereotypes, just understanding just the larger things in order to move on. Right, just put it. Okay, that's a car. Okay, whatever kind of car it is doesn't matter. It's a car. I put it in the section with cars. I can move on. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's kind of, it is like, it's a concept thing like that. So I've heard people use the word discernment. That seems okay to me too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Discernment is for me, discernment is a little bit more of a fine filter, allowing things to kind of pass through. Whereas conceptualizing is just taking blocks of information and attaching it to other blocks of information. It could be refined, for sure, tighter, but I know we're sort of arguing semantics, but the semantics make a difference when someone's hearing a word that really resonates with them. Like we talked earlier about like the endless versus divine, like that changes the texture, because part of the problem is English actually is the language that we're speaking doesn't have the depth actually that many of these other languages have, where you'll have 3 or 4 or 5 meanings for one word, and so when someone says a single word, it gives them this sort of like multi-layered understanding instantaneously as soon as they have it, when we have to kind of like go through and give context or concepts, if you will.
Well, I mean, I guess it comes up with some things where you might have a special word that means something in another language that we don't got it. Right. Shunyata is like the big example of this, where you're like, what the hell does that word mean? Emptiness. Well, that doesn't sound right. Anyway, so yeah, I get it. I think like what I like about what you're talking about though is like when you throw out different words, it's sort of like helps you connect to like what the idea is, and all the different words have a kind of a way of capturing it. Right. And so then I think yeah, for all of us, when we hear these things, you can go, oh, that one speaks to me. Okay, so let me explore what that one means, you know?
Yeah, we're rappers, man. We're spiritual
Yeah.
rappers. We're just not rhyming, but like, some people feel the flow from the East Coast. Some people like it down south. Some people love the Midwest.
Some people
What
like the
can I say?
sound from Georgia. Some people like it from the
You
Golden
know,
State, right?
that's right, man. We got to represent.
So to me, like I had this psych background coming in, and it had a lot to do with, and I think it does in this way of talking too, about how you experience the world. Like you experience sensation in forms, and then you have feelings around them, and those are
Mm,
related to concepts. That's kind of what they're talking about. Mhm.
mhm.
But these are part of a living thing, the whole storehouse of that living thing, and then it starts to kind of go at the passing of the person. These
Yeah.
things start to go away. So there's this loss of like the sense of what the concepts, ideas, and categories were of this particular life. They're dissolving. Mhm. And so it is like kind of interesting at this point. You can kind of get like the Buddhist psychology behind this.
So we've had sort of like eyes and vision, and then we had like ears and sounds. Is there a
Yeah, this is smell. There might be different ways of organizing this. I'm going based on the way that's usually talked about in the Tibetan Buddhist texts that I'm familiar with is again Dalai Lama
this
school,
is yeah, I mean,
and it's Guya Samaja. I think it's pretty consistent. The Book of the Bardo is like more of a Nyingma related text, anyways, a different school than the Dalai Lama school. So there's a lot of overlap, but just to like be upfront, I'm kind of taking this from how it's presented there. Mhm.
yeah, and I've read it in two different places, and it's the same. So
Yeah,
but
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
probably getting it from
Typically the same. Yeah. Um,
but that's
so,
fine.
but anyways, there can be little differences just so if, you don't want to you want to acknowledge. But
But
anyway,
if
so yeah,
some
loss of smell.
if
Mhm.
if someone finds this fascinating and they're practicing it, like one place is going to teach something one way, another place might teach something a different way. It doesn't mean that one is better or worse than the other. Now, depending on who you're talking to from within those schools, they may not totally agree.
Yeah.
But from the outside, I feel like if you give yourself to something and you have the experience of it that comes to you as you do it, then that's real. Now it's gold. It is,
Yeah.
it's in there, whatever.
And we're definitely taking the position of neutrality, not to say that any particular way of doing this is going to be like the definitive one better than the others.
I don't
Like
think that there is one that's better than, at least from my understanding. It's I mean, and I don't even know who would argue really. I mean, maybe somebody obviously would, but what calls to you, that's the best one for you,
Yeah. Or if they happen to present it in a certain way and someone else does it differently, there's no reason to like get all up in arms about it.
No, no. Take your
I know this
panties,
happens, All right.
unbunch the panties.
Yeah. So there's kind of a loss of smell associated with this. So smell becomes associated with the fire phase at this point, which is kind of an interesting choice, but okay.
It is.
And then the next thing that happens is the wind, or wind is a funny term. So this is prana. So it's wind or energy. This gets used in a couple of ways because energy is everything. So these are all energies that are going, kind of like in the biggest E equals MC squared Einstein sense, everything is energy. And now they're isolating this little individual part of a composite being's makeup. So this is sort of more like what you want to call the energy aspect of your individual body or something like that. And it starts to go. Now, when they talk about like how this relates to the overall construction of a person, which is this aggregates conversation, there's this whole idea of what they call compositional factors, which is this big hodgepodge collection of all the different parts that make up a person's, like all the different little like micro factors that come together. And that's kind of hard to talk about that. So I think like the way that I've heard this talked about that makes it a little bit more accessible, and they do talk about this in the, when they do the Tibetan Book of the Dead and the Dalai Lama school for sure, is like it's more like the person's sense of their big picture goals and ambitions, not the details of your feelings moment by moment or your conceptual categories or something like that, or your connection to the form that makes up your body or something like that, but more the idea of like, what are your overarching sort of tendencies of goal, ambition, and personality. With all of these, there's usually some kind of element of wisdom that goes along with this. So with the earth, it's sort of the wisdom of, they call it sometimes the mirror-like wisdom, and then they'll call these other things, different wisdoms associated with each of these different elements, which we probably have to do something on the aggregates and the elements at some point too, just to put another thing on our list.
Well, maybe we do that. Maybe that's the follow up to this then, you know? Because
Yeah,
we're
I guess
doing
we'll see
that.
how we want to do
Yeah,
it. But
yeah,
in
because I
any
don't want
case,
to go too long before we.
yeah. But the idea is that you have this there's a wisdom of accomplishing activities. When this energy within the person gets refined and perfected, you can like more effortlessly accomplish activities, accomplish goals. So there's like, so that's how they talk about it, these big picture goals and agendas. And I think that's a simpler way to talk about this thing. So I think for the person's passing away, even the overriding things and themes of their life,
Right.
those things that they want to accomplish with it, those things are fading for that person too.
You know what's funny? I've definitely had some, intense psychedelic moments for sure. And you can get caught up in the moment, without a doubt, especially if you're feeling some feelings,
Mm-hmm.
And I would love to say that like those things don't affect me, but like they definitely affect the shit out of me,
Yeah.
And sometimes it's really intense and like you're just like, okay, this is it. I'm getting ready now. My heart's gonna stop. And okay, it just stopped. Cool. Oh wait, nope, there it goes again. Oh wait, no, now it's stopping now for real. So you go through this for a long time. But I will tell you that a couple
You're talking
times.
about these like psychedelic induced, very intense experiences of mortality and these kinds of things.
And I tend to go there like pretty much all the time. It's obviously I'm supposed to work with it, but like, come
Yeah,
on.
you're working it. This is something that you're working on.
Yeah. And so the idea of having when you talk about like ambitions or your planned kind of activities, life
Like
projects.
kind of like really deep tendencies of things that you really want to do. It's like it's interesting idea. If you scratch a person deep, they have deep tendencies. Maybe they want to be a parent, maybe they want to be successful, maybe they want to master something, maybe they want to like whatever it is, they want to experience love, they want to experience whatever. Like there's some deep part.
Even deeper, like compassion. Like this is like a bodhisattva kind of ideal,
Well, then you might have an ambition to like become a bodhisattva. Yeah.
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 Right. But I mean, that particular thing has pulled me through more moments than anything else, more than like breathing, more than, that.
Yeah. I hear what you're saying.
That particular point, is like, okay, whatever I need, whatever I have to muster up to kind of deal with this, maybe that's letting go, maybe that's pushing, whatever it is, that's the anchor. That's the other part of the magnet that sort of pulls me to it,
Yeah, I know. I think I know exactly what you're talking about, which gets to the idea of like, that's why meditation is more than just like being mindful or something. There's other parts to this too, So anyways, and again, that's no trash on mindfulness or counting your breath or anything, but there's just more to it than that.
Yeah.
And in those moments when you can tap into this part of yourself, you're kind of tapping into this wind energy within you. And I've had that thing too, like I've had some like heartache in my life, more recently. And like when I re-tap into like the fundamental things I'm here to do, that will always reinvigorate me. And I think in a way you feel energized. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like you feel energy.
Yeah.
It feels like energy. That's how you re-tap into yourself. You like tap into your own energy aggregate and you feel re-energized or something. Not in the psychedelic experience. I don't know how that feels for you. That's a different kind of vibe, but maybe it feels that way even in those moments too. You feel real and re-energized for your life or something.
Yeah. Oh, without a doubt. And I feel like that happens for many, many people. Actually, they come out with a new set with a reinvigorated sense of purpose or a newfound sense of purpose. It's almost like that experience of death rejuvenates their desire to move forward on that path.
But in the moment when you're kind of going through those intense experiences and you re-tap into that, does that feel re-energizing in that immediate moment?
In that immediate moment, I think I don't know, I wouldn't say it's re-energizing. I would say it seems like the only path forward. Like any other path doesn't feel like there's enough energy to walk down. Someone say, well, why don't you do this for your family? Nah. Do this for your kid? No. Do this? No. But then when you find the right line, the one that really feels like we've shed away all the bullshit, we've put down all the ideals and all the hopes and all the desires. This is like soul drive in this particular incarnation. then that begins the process of like, okay, I can see that tomorrow's going to exist, and I could see that the next week is going to exist, and I'm going to will myself forward in order to go there, because that has value that exceeds my own self or exceeds my own understanding
My
of what it is
own
that I
like
am.
conceptual sense of myself, my own
Yes.
more immediate like
Yes.
feelings and whatever. It's something a little bit bigger than that.
Yeah.
Than my
Now,
immediate experience of the form, my immediate experience of the feeling, my immediate experience of whatever I think my concepts are of how I think about things. This is a
yes.
little bit deeper or something. I
Now
think
this
that feels right to me.
now this could be, of course, used in a negative light in terms of like, group mentality, group psychosis, I guess I'll even call it, right? Where everybody feels like they're going to martyr themselves for a greater ideal, and that involves, the erasing of the other, or whatever, right? So this is the kind of like, this is the negative side of that. But I think taken on a personal level, brought down really, really, really fine and subtle at variously moments of intensity, various moments of intensity in people's life. For me, this is the core driver, and sometimes it
Yeah.
is your children.
When you use the word, like when you take away all the bullshit, because you use that word, I think
Yeah.
what we're really saying there is like, whatever that means for that person, when everything
Yes.
else falls away,
Yes.
all the things that are more ephemeral fall away.
Yeah.
Then you're like, okay, so that's the bullshit for that person. Right? Then you get to the core of where they're really coming from. You find out who you are in this way. I think so that's this part of a person then, right? And I think what we're talking about here, and I think I hadn't really thought about it in exactly these words, discovering, is that this is a deep thing that you can tap into in a moment by moment kind of a way when you need it, because it's there. But at the ending of the life, those issues, are wherever they are, and those things dissolve too. So the person no longer has that sense of it as it relates to the now of this particular existence.
And I could say, as much as as much as I could say this as somebody who cannot remember my last life for the life of me. How about that? Or the next one, right? That have been several moments, three in particular, that if I didn't find that, and I will tell you, I didn't search for it. It came to me. It came from me. It came and was brought to my mind. My mind didn't bring it. It just popped up like an inspiration.
This is again the very important part of Daniel. The spontaneity of the occurrence. Yeah.
It just came very natural. That is the only thing that I found that was worth moving forward for. That was the only thing. And I'm not a depressed, type of individual. I didn't go into these, into these moments thinking like, oh, life sucks. Like, what's the point? No. But then in those moments, I was like, yeah, what is the point? Actually, what's the purpose of it? Like, I've asked questions about being a practitioner. I've asked questions about various forms of practice, and I get certain answers. But like when it comes down to like crunch time for me, anyways, that was the thing that kind of like bubbled up and was like, here you go. This will float your boat. The wind, or should I say the prana? Oh, that's a good one right there. Oh my god.
Yeah, floating the boat.
Mm-hmm.
So this is whatever floats your boat. So this is some core part of who we are.
Yeah.
Right. And it has something to do with how we'll probably function in our lives. It'll like be behind the scenes, right? That's very interesting to think about, actually. Yeah, but then, whether or not you express this or not, right? It's kind of a big question.
In relation to this is dissolving.
This is dissolving at this point. So that sense of that in this life is going to go away.
It's gone away. So we've had this nice long discussion now about the importance of this purpose. Or me, I've shared mine. This is now dissolving.
Yeah, because it's associated with the here and now of this time.
Yeah, and so it's dissolving, i.e., you're letting it dissolve. It's dissolving whether
it's going to dissolve whether you want it or not,
whether you want it to or not. So therefore, the tendency, the tomorrow tendency, we'll call it, goes away. So there is no more tomorrow. Nothing matters. That doesn't matter anymore. It's a super deep conceptual, I don't know, puzzle.
Yeah, and I guess like for someone going through this for reals in the ending of their life, that's going to go away.
Going to go away.
Whatever that like feels like for them in those moments, right? which I guess we've all been through it in the past, apparently.
Apparently, we've done
And we're
this.
all going to go through it in the future again.
Yeah.
Where are we at time wise? Do you want to talk about the consciousness aggregate, or you gotta like,
No,
do you gotta bounce?
I think we should pause it here, because once we start getting into the consciousness aggregates, then
It gets long.
it gets long, and I don't want to cut it. But right now we've done the first 4. So we're kind of
So
like,
I guess what we'll do is we're kind of got to a natural spot. The next thing that comes up is consciousness, and then we'll tell the rest of the tale. Okay, that sounds like a plan.
yeah, I think it's good, because the other stuff is a little technical and cool.
Yeah. There's no reason to give it like short shrift and like we don't want to do it like a quickie. We want to spend a little time with it.
That's right. We got to turn the music on. Burn some incense.
A little slow hand, right? Yeah, we don't want to go like.
The only thing, Eric, what in your notes, what do you have for the prana in terms of like?
Oh yeah. So this gets like, again, you could have discussions about this, but like certainly according to the secret assembly, which is the main way this is being talked about, this is loss of taste and touch. So 2 of them get kind of tied in here. It could be little differences.
Yeah.
But taste and touch. So that means that, you kind of gone through your senses now. Sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch are dissolving. And the person will lose those connections.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that like in Chinese medicine in particular, and even in the Buddhist theory, they don't really give that much credence to like taste and smell, because they say you can label them by how many different words. You could say, well, it's sweet, it's sour, it's bitter, it's salty, it's what pungent, but there's not like, it's not like vision or hearing that you can't really describe a picture.
I suppose like as a human being, there is this idea that we really function very strongly on sight and sound. I don't know I thought about that too. When you talk about smell, you go like, well, concepts in smell, like, but then you're kind of like, well, there's a whole thing of like how powerful that can be latently beneath the surface. The smell of like the cooking in the kitchen when you were a kid, the smell of like your lover's hair, you can write a whole book on that or something like that, what that brings back. It has a powerful thing to it, I guess. I know, it's interesting.
Well, it's also a part of the brain, right? You're dealing with the the kind of like the lizard brain, right? The amygdala, the part that's dealing with like non-concepts, it's emotions,
which is kind of deep, but they don't connect it to the emotions.
No, they don't.
It has something to do maybe with like concepts and memory, maybe
memory. But I will say,
think of this, like, I don't know, we'll go to like the someone that you're in love with. When you think of the smell of their hair or the smell of like their skin or something, it's really strong, right? If you can remember that,
especially in the armpit.
It's strong potentially there. It could be strong in other places too.
That's right.
Depending on what's going on. No, but like, that subjective experience of the smell of someone, like you can, you can kind of remember the smell.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe, I can't remember. There's the French writer. Why is his name escaping? I think like he talks about like the taste of a cookie or something, and like, it just brings back a whole world. So maybe this is a whole idea. Again, I've thought about it, but I haven't thought. But like when you start thinking of smell, you're like, well, yeah, obviously we all know that there can be these really strong, deep things in some ways that are affecting in a way that's different than the way sights and sounds are. Even memories of sight and sounds are different.
Well, I don't know. If we take the perspective of a non-humanoid, okay, so remove your senses, how do we experience the world? It's through our senses, right? But the world has smells, the world has tastes, the world has sights, the world has sounds. I think it's
we create them based on who we are. That's the shunyata part.
Yeah, that's the emptiness.
Because for a dog, like smell is like a major fucking thing.
A major thing. Yeah. So but just the idea that like you would experience the loss of sound, even on a conceptual level, or that you would lose the sense of smell, not for momentarily. No, smells no longer exist. You're not creating them. I'm saying that all of these things would kind of go away piece by piece by piece. What would be left? Oh, well, that's for next week. My God, why would he do that? No.
Yeah, cliffhanger.
Oh God,
right in the middle. Next week on Gin and Tantra.
Consciousness remaining. We've done it. We've done the long division, and there's four remainders.
Yeah. Yeah. The whole idea of like, yeah, like, okay, so it's smell and then it's taste and touch, and those are kind of deep somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right. Cool.
All right. Well, Eric, as always, as usual, par for the course. Excellent.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much to our listeners, to our audience, to our friends, to our frenemies. Thank you so much for tuning in, for listening, for watching, however you consume. Thank you for sharing. If you're watching on Apple or listening on Apple, I guess, because they don't have video, leave us a review. It helps the show grow. If you want to pop us up on your Instagram or Facebook or whatever, I don't know. Social media helps, but ultimately, people listening helps even more. So, as always, Eric, thank you so much for working with me. And thank you for everybody for tuning in. For Eric, this is Daniel. We'll catch y'all on the next one. Peace.